Welcome to another exciting episode of the Collaborative Culture Podcast. I am your host, Matt Houston, and today we have an extraordinary guest joining us. I'm incredibly honored to introduce Hellen Fissiahaie, someone I've had the pleasure of knowing for the past 20 years. A born entrepreneur, Hellen is passionate about the growth and potential of emerging markets, who has worked across the globe in a variety of strategic capacities. As founder of F3 Global Advisory Group, LLC, a capacity building, strategic planning, and market entry firm based in Washington, D.C., Hellen helps her client grow and scale her organizations by executing customized services, focusing on people, programs, platforms, and partnerships. With vast experience in health, agriculture, and entrepreneurship for private and public sector clients in the U.S., Africa, Middle East, and the Caribbean islands, servicing both women and youth, she has continuously invested her skills and resources to deliver value-added services for clients. Today, Hellen is well recognized for her work across Africa as a result of F3 Global's private sector projects in partnership with country-specific stakeholders in Tanzania, Ghana, South Africa, Nigeria, Uganda, Oman, Bahamas, St. Maarten, the U.S., and Ethiopia. In today's episode, we'll dive into the power of networking and maintaining relationships to succeed in business. Hellen was talking to a few students in my Topics in Entrepreneurship class, and her insights and experiences are sure to provide invaluable knowledge and inspiration. So let's get started.
My name is Hellen Fissiahaie. I am currently based in Los Angeles. I actually just moved from Washington, D.C. in December to Los Angeles, but I'm really tri-coastal and international, so I spend most of my time between LA, D.C., and Dallas. And then when I'm not in those cities, I'm usually overseas in some country in Africa. So I would say my story starts on the continent. So I was born in Sudan because there was a war between my country, Eritrea, and neighboring country, Ethiopia. So I am a product of parents who refuged twice. First, from the war between Eritrea and Ethiopia, we moved to Sudan, and that's where I was born. Grew up there for the first 5 years, and then we immigrated to the U.S., Dallas, Texas, as refugees. So I'm not somebody who actually grew up with a network, right? And when I say a network, I mean the type of network that would help catapult me where I am now in terms of the career and the industry I'm in. I really just come from a very solid community of people and community of Eritreans from the Dallas community. I would say the best network I know, though, is my mother. Hands down, this woman, any person she's ever crossed in this life, she still has access and connection to them. So any country I travel, even in the most remote parts of the world, she'll be like, "Oh, I know somebody," and I'm like, "What? Okay." And I mean remotes. I used to live in a very remote part of South Africa, and my mom literally called me and was like, "Where are you?" I was like, "I'm in South Africa in an area called Mpumalanga." Um, and she was like, "Oh, I think I know somebody in that area," and she did. But so I think when I think about where my sense of networking comes from, it's watching my mother because she's good with people. She's consistently kind to everyone she meets. She's very likable. She always feels like when you meet people, especially if you call them your friend, it's always better to have a relationship than to burn a bridge. You know, I'm not going to say I always agree with that, but to her, to her benefit, like my whole life is, leveraged on the fact that my mother has been good with people, right? Like people like her. She's easy to spend time with. She's literally a lovely lady, right? Um, so I went to school in Texas, grew up in Dallas, went to school in Dallas, um, elementary to high school, graduated, went off to school at Texas Tech, then came back to University of Texas, Arlington, went to school at UTA, finished out my grad and my graduate school, my undergrad and my graduate school, but I didn't have like, wealthy parents or any of that. So I just kind of applied the model like my mom did, which is as I meet people, I was always like trying to meet people and just, I liked people, right? I liked people. I got to know people and I tried to stay in touch as much as possible. That's actually how I met Matt through another mutual friend. And then from there, we've always stayed friends. We always keep in touch. If he's in DC, he'll hit me up. If I'm in Dallas, I'm hitting him up. And then as life grows, like you don't know where someone goes in life, right? Fast forward 20 years later, we're both in a space that, is about developing cities and communities, and we're able to help each other in different ways. For the last 10 years, from undergrad to grad to leaving Dallas, I moved to DC and built a business. So for the last 10 years, I've been running a business focused on international capacity building. And what does that mean? That means helping governments, SMEs, businesses, locally and internationally develop their organizational system and people capacity so they can grow, scale, and expand into foreign markets. Hasn't always been easy, but I would say a key part of my business is networking and connecting to people. I am not somebody who's on social media actively. I do not promote actively my business. My business for the last 10 years has literally grown and sustained through the power of connections, networks, and people, right? 10 years later, this business is still in business because of my ability and the company's ability to maintain a really positive brand and reputation and integrity and everything we say, we do, we try to do, and just keeping true to what's kind of built this up. And then people talk, right? So if you do good and if you do well, people will share your services. And that's what's been for me. Like, I got into DC government by doing one great project with one company that wanted to partner because of a skill set we had. And then fast forward, that company loved our work, and for the next 5-6 years was literally just putting us on every project that they had for DC government. And then from there we got to learn, understand DC government, and then from there DC government themselves was literally just calling the business and saying, hey, we want to work directly with you. Same thing with federal space, right? Worked with a company that already had federal contracts, started building those relationships, connecting to different people across different platforms. And then slowly but surely, we started getting our own contracts, building relationships with the government internationally, being recognized for our work, getting more work, and so forth, right? Almost everything I've done is really deeply rooted in connecting and networking with people, and learning also value, right? Like the value that I bring to the table, the value I can offer, and recognizing that everything is a two-way relationship, right? So when I connect to people, it's not like, what can you do for me? It's, learning about the person first because they're still individual, and then learning about where they are, what they're trying to do, where they're trying to go, and then providing some sort of value and helping them get there. Get there meaning whatever that there is, right? And then as you build these more authentic and honest relationships, then it's sharing what I need. And then same thing. Not everybody kind of thinks like that, but that's my, I would say, ethos, which is really adding value and being helpful where I can, because whether they are the person that helps me or God or the universe or another opportunity manifests itself, it'll happen. So I'm definitely a 10-year entrepreneur. I have business that's based in DC that supports international clients, primarily out of Africa. I work with African governments. I also work with Africa-based businesses and private entities, as well as U.S. institutional funders on the U.S. side to help them understand the Africa marketplace. So, so that's a little bit about me, a little bit about kind of how I came to life in terms of like building my business. Entrepreneurship is not easy. I will say this. It is it tests more about who you are than the business itself. Like the hardest part for me about being an entrepreneur isn't the work, right? I'm somebody who can work all day, every day. I can go all day from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. meetings. But I feel like the biggest test in entrepreneurship is overcoming you first and understanding like who you are, what value you bring, what's your ethos, right? Not taking the shortcut, not doing the easy things sometimes, and then not falling prey into some kind of negative internal pitfalls. And then the second hardest part is really building your brand in a way that's sustainable, right? So I said, for me, our brand has always been built around integrity and making sure that we deliver quality work, which is why we constantly get referrals and repeat clients. And like I get a ton of referrals. That's what's kept this business going is people referring us or people saying, hey, I know someone, let me connect you, or hey, you know what, her company does really good work, like, go for it. And if I'm being honest, that's really the world we live in. People don't have all the time in the world to kind of do their own due diligence. If they trust you, then they're going to trust that you're referring somebody that's also good in quality, right? Then once you get that opportunity, is then your job to ensure that the person that trusted you to refer you, that you actually deliver upon that trust and do right by that person, even if you don't always end up making the money. I've had clients who were referred to me, weren't always the best clients. We agreed to a contract, and in the middle of the contract, realized they were actually terrible clients. But based on my agreement, I always finished, even if it cost us. Because at the end of the day, I don't want anyone walking around saying, oh, we worked with them and it was a terrible experience. Now, we could say that about them, but they can't actually say that about us, right? And that's always been my thing is like, I will do my best, but I will tell you exactly what I can and can't do. And then along the way, if I can help somebody by connecting them to a resource or a person or a situation or new knowledge or new information, then that's value add, right? Because knowledge really is power. And on top of knowledge, relationships are even more powerful, right? Because it just takes one person believing in you, one person opening up a door, one person making a connection that can change your life. So networking, especially in entrepreneurship and connecting in entrepreneurship, is I would say like top three vital things. Like you cannot be an entrepreneur and then be completely isolated, don't want to engage with people, don't want to connect, don't want to network. There's a smart way about doing it, but it's just part of the literal, I would say, DNA of being an entrepreneur. It's really connecting and networking with people. So that's an interesting place because I don't think when I started, I actually knew exactly what I wanted to do, right? I just knew a couple things. I knew if I was going to do something that was committed to being and building a business, it had to be now, right? The current company I was working for, they went from being a great place to work, lots of autonomy, just really enjoyable experience, to hyper toxic, not feeling like I could grow, poor leadership, all of these things. And then me realizing that, okay, do I want to go back and work for another company? And nothing in my spirit pulled me to anybody else, right? Like literally nothing, right? And so I was just like, you know what? I had also this experience in South Africa previous to that job of living in an area and managing all these projects, building entrepreneurship projects, working with youth, working with local communities, governments. And so, I was managing a lot of people, a lot of projects, a lot of things. And I was like, wow. And I just kept seeing these gaps, right, in the market, like how these US companies would have like an orphanages they invested in, and now it's like empty building, or water projects that they did, and so the community doesn't use it, as seen more as a dump site, or a hospital that's no longer active. Just all of these projects. And I realized, like, when I would talk to the community, that these companies would come in, or NGOs or nonprofits, whatever, and they actually didn't care about what these people actually needed. They just kind of made a lot of assumptions, like, oh, we think you need this, we're going to invest all this money in here. And I was like, that's not how this works, right? Like, you have to be, in whatever you do, you have to ensure that the people, A, truly need it, B, you educate them on how to use it, and then C, that they are part of the stakeholder, not just somebody that it's like, great, we take a photo with you, but actively are key stakeholders in this process. And I realized there may be a gap here, right? Because I spent a little over a year doing this work and realizing that there's this gap here around the continent. And then when I came back to this current job, the job that I had left to start this company, similar. Like we had a Ghana well project. I did an assessment, and then the company, and I told the company like, hey, we should hire a water and irrigation expert to do a study of all of the wells we've invested $1 million plus into to see if they're actually active and working, and then we should redesign them. But that's going to cost them money, and so they didn't want to invest in that. And I was like, so you're good in terms of just taking this money, investing it once, and then not actually having it work. And so it's like over the years, as I'm learning things, I started seeing this gap. And I've always had a huge interest in the continent, right? Its development, its marketplace. When I was in grad school, my school didn't even have a great Africa program or any program. And I harassed the school to let me do part of my education externally, like find projects that I could get credits for. And just creative ways of like getting my degree, honestly. And so I already had this initial like interest in this marketplace that everybody saw as like impoverished and whatnot. And then I had another interest in community building. Like even in Dallas, I worked on a lot of community-based projects from my youth on. And so, as I'm ready to exit this company, who is now toxic, I did not have, let me say this. My current network looks nothing like my network when I left that job. I mean nothing. Okay? Like nothing. Like I did not know investors, I did not know CEOs, I did not know anybody. Like I just knew some of those little bitty folks who kind of like me, you know what I mean? But I'm one of those people like if I really believe in something, I take the plunge. I don't know where I'm gonna land, but I did it. And so I just told myself, like, I still have this energy. I'm young. I don't have kids. I'm not married. I can hustle. So let's try this, right? And so I committed to a date, like a date. And I wrote out my letter of resignation. I cleaned out my entire desk, cleaned out my entire like computer system, my laptop, iPad, everything that I had to submit. And then come that day, I came to the office and I was like, bloop, goodbye, and set that letter off. But see, the thing is, when you have no plan B, you have to make plan A work, right? Or die trying, literally.
Ego down the hill.
Okay, right. So the way I always equate it is I literally jumped off a roof and on my way down started building my wings, right? And listen, I have bumped into walls, to windows, scraped the ground multiple times. All of that has not been an easy journey, especially not working and focusing on a marketplace. I've always focused on minority businesses. I've always focused on Africa. I've always focused in areas where like funding is a challenge. So doing that has been very difficult, but along the way, I have learned a lot. And part of it is like taking the losses and not making the losses your story, right? Like letting that just be part of your journey. And along the way, I've also have been blessed to find people who could share in the journey with me, whether they're part of my network and just people I could frustrate and vent to, or, people that could help mentor me in a specific knowledge base or gap. And a lot of that takes active participation and active looking for people, right? So going to networking events, talking to people, having lunches, brunches, and everything else, right? And a lot of it also takes getting off of my comfort, right? Like this fear of like, oh, I'm not good enough, or, whatever thoughts I would have internally. And especially when you're in the DC space, it's a very different beast. Like DC is very, like Texas is very southern, right? So people are nice and a little more gentle. DC is a little rougher, okay? DC is like, what's your name, where you work, and who do you work for?
Transaction.
It was super transactional. Relationships are hard to form in DC unless they're transactional relationships. So people want to know what big corporation or big agency or big, whoever And then what's your role and title in that? Because they need to understand, like, are you, in their minds, right? Are you someone that we should talk to? Are you worth the energy and time? You know? And that, when you're small and you're a startup and your company has no name and you can't get into a room or whatever, that could kill off your mental, emotional, and social self, right? And I've had a lot of doubts along the way. It's not been easy, but I just kept pushing, kept trying different things. To me, adaptability is key, because if I stayed in my thought process at any point, um, I think my business would have died, honestly. Because at some point I was like, okay, this working with smaller companies, local entrepreneurs, it's not going to pay the bills. So I had to pivot. Then another point I was like, okay, this is cool, but this is too long of a frame. So I had to keep adjusting and adapting and trying different things. And it's not easy. It doesn't ever really get easy. It just becomes more manageable because now you have the tools, the resources, and the connections to do it.
All right. So my last question before I open it up is you talked about your journey and how you got there and how you're building the plane essentially as you jumped out, right? Or getting your feathers so that you can fly, right?
Yep.
How did the skill sets you learned in corporate or in your other jobs translate into entrepreneurship? And how are you as a manager able to do the day-to-day things to keep your business afloat?
No, great question. I would say two types of situations, right? Like, I have had managers and executive directors and basically people that managed me that were horrible, right? Like, just not a good facilitator of me getting to the next step. And I learned from that, right? That was like a key learning. I was always like, oh, this boss, yeah, no, see, I can't be like you. So that when you learn, see, the thing is, you could either be angry about the people that managed you, or you could take that as a lesson learned and be like, that's not how I'm going to manage. Like, whenever somebody works for me, there is a lot of autonomy, right? For me, like, I give someone all of the autonomy because I believe that you are hired to do X, Y, and Z. And my only and primary job is to ensure that you have the skill sets, the confidence, and the resources to execute your job. In order to do that, I have to trust that you can do it or you can figure it out, right? I've had people try to micromanage me. No, ma'am. I am not a micromanaged person, and I don't micromanage. So that's one key thing. I think when you're an entrepreneur, you have to both be a leader and a follower at the same time. Like, I've had to follow some good people and I've had to follow some terrible people. So I take the lessons from the terrible people and I say, okay, you know what? When they did this, it was terrible for me. I don't want to manage somebody like that, right? And then in situations where I had a better leader, a better mentor, or whoever, I looked at, okay, what made them so great? And then I would try to apply some of those. So in terms of management and leadership, I think part of it is kind of watching the example that's been set in front of you, good, bad, and ugly. In terms of other skill sets, a lot of the work prior to starting this company was dealing with people and networking to ensure that our organization, or whatever organization I worked with, had a solid ecosystem of partners. So it's always about me talking to other organizations, connecting the dots. So I carried that a lot over into my own business because I've always worked in a community-centered organization. So whatever we're doing, either we're building a program for this community that we serve, or we're building a project that's specific to like a bigger agenda or a summit or a conference. Like, it's always been about building something, and having those skill sets has been super helpful in my own business, because a lot of what we do as a capacity building firm is building something. We're building people, right? So that means we have to understand the person. We're also building platforms for organizations, understanding what type of platform best facilitates this message, or we're building a project or a program. So for me, having that background and building community-based design thinking projects or whatever has been super instrumental. And then the other part is, as a younger person, I always said yes. Okay. Like if you look, Matt knows, if you look at my 20s, listen, if you look at my
You
20s,
don't need boss.
right? I've done everything. Like I'm out here. I was out here trying different things, right? And when I got a little older, I thought about that and I was like, that's a little chaotic, right? But now I'm so thankful for that because no one scares me. Like meaning the highest of a presidential office to the lowest of whatever, right? Doesn't scare me because I've been in all of it. Like so at the end of the day, I realized that the person hustling on the street and the guy sitting at the president's office is just a person with a title, right? With a goal, with a mission. So that's been very helpful for me as an entrepreneur because it took down a lot of these perceptions about people and titles and categories and like whatever. And because I don't come from parents who are like tons of pedigree or education or whatever, that could have easily created a space for me where I didn't think I was good enough. And there were many moments that I didn't think I was good enough, but what I kept doing was I was like, you know what, all right, let's try. Let's sit in the room. Even if I don't say anything, let me sit in the room and learn. Right. And then once I got into the room, then I was like, that's a nice little Harvard title with a PhD. But ma'am, we got the same level of knowledge, right? Um, so you just realize that we're all human at the end of the day. We all have goals, and it's like you just have to figure out how to connect to people. And I think that's been very helpful. And just my 20s saying yes has been super helpful because I don't think if I said yes, I wouldn't know how to run a program. I wouldn't know how to run community. I wouldn't know how to hustle. Okay. I wouldn't know how to get past all the no's too. Because I had a lot of no's and I still have a lot of no's. And I'm not scared of a no. No's like not right now, maybe later. Sometimes it's really no, and it's like, okay, you know what? This is not this is a mismatch, and I'm good. Like maybe we're not the right collaboration or partnership because there's so many people and so many opportunities, and so you got to learn to live in that world where there's so much. And sometimes I look at it as the grace of God too, because some of these no's, when I look back, I'm like, thank you, Lord, but that was a no. Thank you, right? Because you think you want something so bad because you're either living out of lack, fear, or whatever else. But for me, some of those situations, some of them that I have pursued and gotten, I didn't like them. They were not positive. Others that God like passed me up from were a blessing in disguise, right? So I try to keep this perception in my head where it's like, I'm going to get where I need to get. And as long as I just let this journey be what it is, have my plan, have my team, do what I need to do and keep it pushing, like it literally will get where I need to get. Now, sometimes I don't know exactly what that is. I may know from a project or company or end of the year, but sometimes like you don't know what the business I started and the business today are two separate businesses under the same name, right? Doing similar things, but the business today is very clear, very focused, very specific. The business then was like, I want to work with entrepreneurs. Like, I want to be an entrepreneur 10 years ago when entrepreneurship wasn't as sexy, right? So there we have it.
Great. Any questions? You do have a question coming, by the way. You have a question. Take your time to ask whatever you'd like.
Oh, no, I don't have a question. More of just kind of discussion, really.
Okay, well, let's have a discussion.
Yeah, let's have a discussion.
Here's here too.
Doesn't have to be a Q&A. Discussion.
I remember you saying about, networking, making contacts and all that. I do agree with it. I'm currently trying to get my accounting degree, and later on I'll get my CPA degree. And my entire plan is to, first of all, try to work for a company so I can get all my experience and make some contacts. But later on, I do want to go freelance, and I do agree that having contacts later on certainly does help. And I will certainly say that my grandma, bless her heart, has been helping me so much and helping me make contacts and stuff. And it's been really helpful. And when you said your mama helped you with making contacts, I, felt what's the word? Connected.
That's awesome. You know what? You just bring up a good point, right? So like when I was thinking about my mom, I wasn't thinking my mom professionally, right? But when I really, really think about it, right? Um, my mom, like your grandma, they have relationships that you don't know if they're actually connected to your career or not. When I moved to DC, my mom was like the person who got me a place to stay with a cousin I'd never met a day in my life, right? Because of her network and her relationships. And then she called up a bunch of folks, family and non-family people I've never met in my life, who were working at these big organizations and trying to steer me in the right direction, because she was like, I don't even know what my daughter's trying to do, like whatnot, but I know that she can do it. So I'm just going to connect you and y'all figure it out. Right. And along the way, like sometimes we have to move away from a place of thinking that our parents and family members don't have the right connects, because you don't know who they know who knows someone else. Right. So I'm really happy to hear you're like, connecting with your grandma. I'm sure grandma knows a lot of people.
Yeah, no, and I agree that not a lot of people kind of have that luxury of their, people they know have a lot of connections. Sometimes they have to make the connections themselves.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, that's my current plan. My plan is, try and hook up with another company, try to make other contacts while I'm working for them and get some experience. And when I feel comfortable, go freelance and just expand my network from there. I'll probably have a sizable one by then.
Absolutely. I mean, I love your plan, honestly, because
It's a solid plan, right?
no, definitely, because I think a lot of people. Here's the thing about entrepreneurship today that I'm not the biggest fan of. Entrepreneurship has been sold as this like easy to do, sexy thing, freedom, but it's not that. Entrepreneurship is literally it's like a love, right? Like it's a choice that you have to keep choosing every day, right? To continue to build and work on. And there's a difference between being a freelancer and doing projects here and there and building a business, right? And so I don't feel like I feel like a lot of young people have been sold this idea of like, go to school, then jump off and be an entrepreneur, right? But the question is, do you have the resilience to sustain that? Some people may have financial capacity from family and friends, but a lot of young people that look like us or are minorities don't always have, like, I didn't have family capital behind me. Like, had plenty of broke years, plenty, plenty, plenty. Okay. And so I didn't have parents who could be like, yeah, let me just write you a check for all your bills for that year. It was like, nope, got to figure this out. And like that could trigger a lot of other health issues. So I love that I love that. And I've had friends who are entrepreneurs who have been hospitalized as a result of the struggle, right? Because you work yourself to death sometimes and you're not seeing results. That doesn't mean things are not happening. It's just not that type of result at that time. And that's okay, right? Um, so I love that you're saying like my plan is to go work for someone, learn these things. Clearly you're taking a class on entrepreneurship, right? And you're hearing from real entrepreneurs about all of the struggles. So why try it on your own if you can hear it from someone else and kind of pick nuggets up along the way, right? Because the more informed you are, the better of an entrepreneur you'll be, the better of a leader you'll be, the better of a follower you'll be, the better of a boss you'll be, right? So I love that you're like, hey, I'm actively taking this class. I'm going to go get these degrees. I'm going to then go work for someone. I'm going to learn this. And then at some point, once I feel like I've learned, I'm going to now start my own. That's a solid plan. Like I'd give you an A+ for that plan, right? And you recognize the value of networking along the way. So you're not being unintentional. You're going to be intentional as you meet people at your job, as you meet potential future clients, as you meet folks that are your coworkers or collaborators or competitors, whoever. So that's awesome.
Thank you.
I do agree, and that's kind of been one of the biggest things that I see about business in general is communication is probably one of the most important core aspects to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Communication is key, honestly, especially in a world where we communicate in such a fragmented way. And I'm big on context. Like, if you ever know me, context is so important to me. Like, I don't like, people taking something out of context, because that's where we live. We're like in this big cancel culture where everything is hyper, quick, and like there's no context into what someone said or did or how they said it, and there's not a lot of critical thinking about everything, and everybody jumps into a bandwagon here and there. So I think as a young person, it's very important for you to understand communication both ways, right? Not just how you communicate, but how to take in communication. Because when you're sitting in front of a client, that's all you have. It's you, that person, and the communication between you. And then how does that land on paper? And then how is that paper executed in real life, right? So that's important.
I agree.
Awesome.
Cool. Now, I think you had a
Question is, I wanted to ask, when you were earlier started out in your career, like, did you receive any advice that stuck with you that helped you get to where you are now?
Yes, actually, I think one of the key things is, well, a couple. I'm gonna give you a couple. One of the things that somebody said to me early on, which I didn't practice. Okay, so let me be real. I didn't practice it. It's like, don't make decisions out of lack. So when you're in a place where you're lacking emotionally, mentally, financially, whatever, right? So you're not in the right headspace. When you make a decision, you're making a decision out of desperation, right? In whatever way that is. You might be desperate because you ain't got no energy. You might be desperate because you need more cash. But those decisions are never the best decisions, right? So it's like you're coming from a place of weakness. And I had a mentor say that to me, and I was like, what does that mean? Right? But then when I looked over the years, I'm like, every time I was in a place of lack and I made a decision, I regretted that decision later. Most times, right? Not all the time, but most times. So that's something that I would tell anybody. Like, make sure that whatever decision you ultimately land on is from a place of power, right? Like, you're mentally in the best headspace, you're emotionally in the best headspace. Even if financially you're not in the best space, but like, make a decision that ensures that you're not making from a financial lack, right? That's one. The other one would be, everybody wants to work with people who they know, like, and trust, right? So I practice that indefinitely now. Like, if I do not like a person or situation, I don't deal with it anymore, right? And granted, that is grace, right? That means I have worked enough to a place where I could be a little more choosy, right, about the type of clients, projects, and whatever else I engage in. But at the end of the day, it's like, we all of us. I mean, like, the reason I'm even on this call is because I know, like, and trust Matt, right? He
Same
didn't.
here, by the way.
Thank you. So it doesn't require him sending a formal email. It's just a WhatsApp message like, hey, I'm gonna jump on this call. We're talking about entrepreneurship. Sure, Matt, networking, cool, I got you, right? You want to work and you want to be a person that people can know, like, and trust you. And you want the opposite. You want to work with people that you know, you like, and you can trust, because at the end of the day, yes, you will have people that pretend and whatnot, whatever. But I think for you, figure out what your ethos is. Like, what is your kind of way of operating, right? And don't get caught up in the whims of how people operate. Like, figure you out. Like, for me, one of the key things, even from a young age, I was like, yeah, I'm not about to be that grimy, shady person. Like, that's just not me. And I don't know how to operate in that anyways. So I always just stuck to the fact that, like, I'm gonna work in a way that is honest, that has a lot of integrity behind it. I like people and I want people to win. And if somebody comes along the way and they're not that great, in the beginning I would work with them because I was like, oh, what now I just trust my gut. I'm like, you know what? This is probably not gonna be the best situation for us. And I'm okay in declining and saying, like, it sounds like great, but yeah, it's not for us, not for me. So I would say, like, try to work with people that you know, like, and trust, and try to collaborate and build relationships, especially when you're networking, where don't jump into a relationship with somebody like, I used to do that. I'd be so excited about a project and be like, yeah, yeah. And then just to find out, like, these are not people I'd even want to be associated with, let alone in a whole business dealing, right? So take the time to get to know people. Take the time to allow your gut, your senses to fully be present to the experience so then you can make a decision that's based off of all your senses and trust your gut, man. Like, we're so distracted that we don't even know our gut. You know what I'm saying? Like, have you ever been in a place with somebody and you're like, this does not feel good. Like, I don't know what it is about this person, project, or situation, but it doesn't feel good. But you go with it because everybody's going with it, or you go with it because it sounds good. And then fast forward 6 months later, you're like, oh, this deal is a hot mess. Like, why? But you knew. So learn while you're still young, learn to facilitate, like, spend time alone. Like, I can't tell young people that enough. You want to be an entrepreneur, get to know you. Okay. Because the only person in any room, in every room, is you. Not your friend, not your phone, not your connection. It's you. So get to know yourself first and get to know yourself well so you can hear yourself in these rooms and in these situations so you can come from a place of power. When you don't know yourself, you're coming from a place of like distraction, other people's voices, whatever. So I learned that later in life, which I've now like been to a place where it's like, nah, this is not for me because I know myself and I hear myself very well, and I'm okay declining things, right? Because if it's not for me, it's not for me. But if it's for me, you cannot do nothing at all to keep it away from me. So I'd say those three things.
That's really good. Thank you, Hellen. I appreciate you. I know that I've taken enough of your time. I want to
No
give you
worries.
back your evening. But before we log off, I want to acknowledge you in your role in my journey as an entrepreneur. I've literally had to stay on your couch when I was working. So thank you for being a great friend. Thank you for being one of the smartest people that I know. And thank you for all the work that you're doing internationally.
Thank you. Same to you. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to more. And thank you for this opportunity. I love talking to younger folks, and I wish you two a great journey. And I feel like in the future, I am sure I will hear great things about you and your businesses.